Hello my treasures, it's time to twist it up with Hearthstone's new game mode, Twist. As you have probably already heard, this game mode is going to be replacing Classic and it is going to be a rotational format to try to hit some of those nostalgic moments within Hearthstone, while also providing a deck building challenge, and because of which I have prepared 11 decks for the release of this new game mode that we will be going over today. Now, I'm not going to be promising any of these decks are really good, but a lot of them are going to be wacky and a lot of fun to play test around. The first deck on our list is going to be a Rainbow Death Knight. This list is going to be very similar to the one that I put out this week. However, there are a few key differences. First off, we can't use any neutral cards, so we're not going to be running things like Queen of Jar or Fizzle. However, I did really want to showcase some cards that don't really see too much play in Standard Hearthstone as it currently stands. That could make their home maybe in this game mode, which is why I went with Rainbow instead of something like Blood. I thought it would be a lot more fun to see if we can OTK our opponent by using things like Chromatic Necrotic Explosion. Now for the next class, which is going to be Demon Hunter, revisiting one of my favorite cards, Il'gynoth. This card was a terror when he was in rotation. If you didn't know, the thing that Il'gynoth does is make lifesteal damage the enemy hero instead of healing you. So the idea behind this is going to be using Il'gynoth in combination with going down swinging and Eye of Shadow in order to OTK our opponent by swinging into all of our opponent's minions. You might be noticing this combo does require 11 mana, but we are running things like Relic of Dimensions and Skull of Gul'dan to try to discount some of these combo pieces. If we cannot win through this combo, we are going to win through Jace Darkweaver as a way to copy all of the previous fail spells that we cast during the game. And while this deck might not be questline Demon Hunter that a lot of people are expecting out of the class for Twist, I do think this one perfectly demonstrates the possibilities that we can use within this new game mode. Now let's get onto the next list, which is going to be Druid. For this list, we're going to be revisiting a classic deck, Guardian Animal Druid, with a little bit of a twist. We are going to be using a Death Beetle to OTK our opponent once we can put down multiple copies of this. The reason why we are going to be using a Death Beetle within this list is Guardian Animal Druid always did use Survival of the Fittest, and we can easily OTK our opponent with just 2 copies of Death Beetle if we have a Wildheart Guff to get to 20 mana, and use things like Moonlit Guidance to additional copies of key combo cards. We have a few early game removal tools and a bunch of draw power that should allow this deck to operate pretty well. Now for the next deck, which is going to be Secret Hunter. I know I did a recent Secret Hunter list on this channel, however I really wanted to do something with Petting Zoo since it's back in rotation for this game mode. Petting Zoo allows you to summon a 3/3 Strider for each secret that you control, and because there are a lot of really good secrets within this format, we should be able to easily control a bunch of them. This deck is going to be more of a control style of hunter deck, where you're going to be using all of your secrets as ways to counteract all of your opponent's cards that they are going to be playing down. And then into late game, you can finish off your opponent with a combination of Stranglethorn Art and King Crush. This was a deck that I had a lot of success with back in the day when most of these cards were in rotation. The Costume Singer should give us another additional 1-drop that the deck historically had been missing. Now let's get onto the next list, which is going to be Freeze Mage. This is a classic Hearthstone deck. Because most of the freeze support is going to be in the game at the same time, I figured this would be a fun one to try out. It's a deck that's been missing for quite a long time within Standard Hearthstone, and is something that I've been really itching to try out myself once again. Essentially, the game plan for this deck is to freeze out our opponent as much as humanly possible so we can finish them off by using a bunch of the hero power package that we are running in the deck that will scale up our hero power absurdly high so we can finish them off with a huge Fire Eye. Now for the next deck, which is going to be Dude Paladin, featuring a Rise to the Occasion, aka the most balanced out of all of the questlines from United in Storm. This deck hopes to use the most out of this questline with a lot of the new Dude support that we have seen recently within the game. This is also going to rely on some of the pure paladin support because we're forced to be pure paladin, so we might as well use it, such as Countess. And we also are going to be using a Lothraxian, the Redeemed, in order to give all of our big dudes Divine Shield, as the questline gives all the dudes for the rest of the game +2/+2, which cannot be silenced because it buffs the player and not the individual units. Now, for the next list, which is going to be for the aggro fans. Overheal Priest, since we have access to a few key cards, such as Gift of Luminance, that will allow us to get additional copies of minions that we want the overheals on, and Gift of the Naru, which will allow us to easily overheal our entire board and get a lot of advantage off of that. And finally, since we are going to be restoring so much HP, we can AoE nuke our opponent's board with a good old Zyrilla, straight out of good old Control Priest from before the rotation. Overall, I think this archetype is probably one of the ones that wins out the most with this new rule set and this game mode, as there are a lot of cards that are going to be within the bracket that this deck can make a lot of use out of that rotated out right before they decided to introduce the new overheal keyword. Now for the next list, which is going to be Questline Rogue, aka Among Us Rogue, which we're going to play a bunch of SI cards, SI7 cards. These are going to be things that have SI7 within their name to give us the final questline reward of Spy Master Scabs, which gives us all of the spy gizmos that this card can randomly generate, which include things that will bounce cards back to your opponent's hand, get rid of minions on the board, give your minions stealth plus attack, and so on and so forth. Historically, this deck was always limited by how many times you could get the Scabs Battlecry off. However, we do now have access to Breakdance and Shadow of Demise as additional shadow steps outside of the 2 shadow steps that you will be running, while also having access to the powerful concoction package in order to control the board until you can finish off the questline. Overall, I expect this deck to be a lot stronger than the original standard version of the list, as it does have a lot of new tools that could be really good in this deck. Now let's go to the next class, which is going to be Shaman, which is going to be Horn of the Wind Lord OTK Questline Shaman. If you've been paying attention to my channel, you'll know one of my favorite cards from the Audiopocalypse mini set is Horn of the Wind Lord. However, in standard rotation, there are no easy ways to abuse this card in Shaman, even though it is a dual class card. However, we do, while in Twist, have access to Storm Strike, which will allow us to increase the attack of our hero by additional 3, thus allowing us to get up to 18 points of damage with Horn of the Wind Lord. And because we don't really have that many ways to copy cards within this rule set of no neutrals, I figured the best way to copy it would be Command of the Elements, which the final reward allows you to duplicate all spells that you do cast within the rest of the game, which brings the total amount of damage to 30, which means you can OTK any opponent as long as they don't have armor, since Renathal isn't going to be within this game mode. The interesting thing about this deck in particular, however, is Cage Mat Custodian will also exist in Twist, which means you essentially are going to be running 4 cards of the weapon instead of just 2. This deck will also hope to use some of the new overload support that was introduced within Festival of Legends. Now, for the next deck, which is going to be Questline Warrior. I know, all the questlines back to back to back, but honestly, out of all of the possibilities for Warrior, this felt like the one that would be the most put together outside of Control Warrior. The final reward for Raid the Docks gives you Captain Ricard, that gives you a weapon at the start of each of your turns, a random pirate, and does 2 damage to 2 random enemies, which can hit the same target for the rest of the game once you do put down Captain Ricard. This is an incredibly good final reward, and historically has always been one of the better quest lines and had to be nerfed quite a few times. Now, there are a few cards that are missing from this list that we would have really liked to have access to, such as the amalgams. However, since we have no access to neutral cards, we are going to be using a Rift package along with a little bit of a menagerie package through Rockmaster Voon as a way to copy Captain Ricard if we can get her to be in our hand when we slam down Voon. This in theory doubles the reward that we are going to be getting off of the questline reward, and thus should give us a lot of advantage, even though we don't have access to things like a Brand's Bronzebeard in order to double the battle cry, or ways to bounce this card back to the hand. Now for the final deck, which is going to be a weird and wacky deck of Chaos Warlock. The idea behind this is we're going to be running 2 spells. Yes, you heard me right. 2 spells, Deck of Chaos and Sympathy of Sins, which means we can easily get access to either one through using Hull Breaker. What Deck of Chaos ends up doing is swapping the cost and attack of all minions within your deck. So things like Doomkin is going to cost 3 instead of 6. Entitled Customer is also going to cost 3, and Phantom Lord of the Opera is going to cost 15 baseline and have 30 attack. Now, is that going to make him a harder target to remove? No, not really, but if we can OTK our opponent by using a Phantasm that has 30 attack, I figured why the hell not, as it seemed incredibly funny. Now, those were all the decks that I came up for day 1. Let me know down below if there's any of these decks that you want to try out. Again, I'm not promising any of these are going to be incredibly strong, but I should be playtesting some of these lists later on in the day on stream at Twitch, which I'll leave a link to that down below. That should start around 4:30 p.m. PST, Pacific Standard Time, if you need to know. And like always, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, bye-bye.